Hey there, sleepy listeners. Welcome to tonight's history podcast designed to lull you into a peaceful slumber with tales from the past. We're diving into the medieval kitchen, a place of fire, flavor, and a surprising amount of ingenuity, where every single item tells a story of survival, creativity, and a world far removed from our modern conveniences. No microwaves, no blenders, no takeout menus, just raw, gritty resourcefulness in a time when cooking was as much about staying alive as it was about eating. So, settle into your cozy bed, let the world fade away, and imagine you've just stepped into a smoky, bustling medieval kitchen in the year 1350. The fire's crackling, the air smells of herbs and sweat, and every tool around you is a testament to human endurance. Let's explore every single item in this kitchen, piece by piece, and uncover what life tasted like in the Middle Ages. Close your eyes and let's begin. First, let's set the scene. You're in a medieval household, maybe a peasant's hut or a modest manor kitchen. The room is dim, lit only by the flickering glow of a hearth fire. The walls are rough stone or wattle and daub, smeared with soot from years of smoke. There's no electricity, no running water, just a dirt or stone floor beneath your feet, worn smooth by countless footsteps. The kitchen isn't a separate room like today. It's the heart of the home, where cooking, eating, and living all collide. If you're a peasant, your kitchen might be the only room in your house, shared with your family, a few chickens, and maybe a goat if you're lucky. If you're in a wealthier home, the kitchen's a bit larger, maybe in a separate outbuilding to keep the heat and fire risk away from the main hall. Either way, it's a chaotic, smoky, fragrant space where every item has a purpose, and nothing goes to waste. Let's start with the centerpiece of any medieval kitchen, the hearth. This isn't just a fireplace. It's the engine of the kitchen, the sun around which everything else orbits. Picture a wide, open fire pit built into the floor or raised slightly, with logs crackling and spitting embers. The hearth is made of stone or clay, designed to hold heat for hours. There's no chimney in most peasant homes, so smoke curls up to the rafters and escapes through a hole in the roof, or just lingers, stinging your eyes and coating everything in a fine layer of soot. Wealthier homes might have a proper chimney, but even then, the air is thick with the scent of burning wood. The hearth is where all cooking happens. Boiling, roasting, baking, stewing. It's not just for food either. It's where you heat water, dry herbs, and warm your frozen hands after a day in the fields. Maintaining the fire is a full-time job. You're constantly feeding it wood, adjusting the logs to control the heat, and sweeping away ash to keep it burning clean. No thermostats, no gas stoves, just you, the wood, and a prayer that the fire doesn't go out. Next to the hearth, you'll find the fire irons, a collection of metal tools that are your only defense against the chaos of an open flame. There's the poker, a long iron rod with a blunt end, used to prod logs into place or break up clumps of ash. It's heavy, slightly rusted, and feels like an extension of your arm after years of use. Then there's the tongs, two hinged metal arms for grabbing burning logs or hot coals. They're crude, often hand-forged by the local blacksmith, and their grip is never quite as secure as you'd like, making every move a test of dexterity. You might also have a fire shovel, a flat, wide piece of iron for scooping ash or moving embers. These tools aren't just practical, they're lifesavers. A poorly managed fire could burn down your house or, worse, leave you without heat or food. Every poke, every adjustment, is a small act of survival in a world where fire is both friend and foe. Hanging above or beside the hearth is the cauldron, the medieval kitchen's workhorse. This is a massive, heavy pot, usually made of cast iron or bronze, with a rounded bottom and sturdy handles. It's suspended from a trivet, a three-legged iron stand, or a chain and hook dangling from a beam above the fire. The cauldron is where pottage, the staple stew of the Middle Ages, simmers for days, even weeks. It's filled with whatever you've got: barley, oats, turnips, onions, maybe a scrap of pork if you're lucky. The cauldron size depends on your wealth. Peasants might have a small one, barely enough for a family of 6, while manor kitchens boast cauldrons big enough to feed dozens. The metal is blackened from years of use, and the inside is encrusted with layers of cooked-on grime that add flavor to every meal. Cleaning it, Good luck. You'd scrape it with a stick or rinse it with water you hauled from a well, but it's never truly clean. The cauldron's magic is its endurance. It's built to last generations, a symbol of the kitchen's unrelenting rhythm. On the hearth's edge, you'll spot the spit, a long iron rod used for roasting meat over the open fire. Roasting is a luxury, reserved for feast days or wealthier households, because meat is rare for peasants. The spit is simple but ingenious. You skewer a chunk of mutton, pork, or maybe a goose, then rest the rod on two Y-shaped supports hammered into the ground or built into the hearth. Turning the spit is grueling work, often left to a child or servant who rotates it slowly to ensure even cooking. Some fancy manor kitchens have a turnspit, a small wheel or crank connected to the spit, powered by a dog running in a treadmill-like cage, a medieval automation marvel. The spit's surface is pitted and greasy, a testament to the rare but glorious moments when meat sizzles and drips, filling the room with a mouth-watering aroma that makes the endless pottage days feel worth enduring. Beside the hearth, you'll find the baking stone or griddle, a flat slab of stone or iron heated directly in the fire. This is where you cook flatbreads, oatcakes, or barley loaves. The stone is heavy, often cracked from years of heat, and you have to gauge its temperature by feel. Too hot, and your bread burns. Too cool, and it stays doughy. There's no oven in most peasant homes, so the baking stone is your only shot at anything resembling bread. In wealthier homes, you might find a beehive oven, a dome-shaped clay or stone structure built into the wall near the hearth. You'd heat it by burning wood inside, then rake out the ashes and slide in your dough to bake in the residual heat. The oven's a status symbol. Only lords or prosperous merchants can afford one. But even then, it's a far cry from today's precision appliances. Baking is a gamble, and every loaf is a small victory against hunger. All right, sleepy travelers, let's step back into the smoky haze of our medieval kitchen, where the hearth is still crackling and the air hums with the scent of survival. We've explored the fire and its iron companions, but now let's turn our attention to the tools and vessels that transform raw ingredients into something edible. These are the unsung heroes of the medieval cook's world, simple, sturdy, and endlessly practical. Close your eyes, picture that dim, bustling room, and let's continue our journey through every single item in this 14th century kitchen. The fire's glow is your guide, so let's keep moving. Next up, we have the cooking pots, the cauldron's smaller cousins. Unlike the massive cauldron that dominates the hearth, these pots are more manageable, often made of clay, bronze, or occasionally iron. They come in various sizes, from tiny vessels for sauces to larger ones for boiling vegetables or simmering broth. Clay pots are common in peasant homes because they're cheaper, molded by local potters and fired in crude kilns. They're fragile, though, prone to cracking if the fire's too hot or if you drop them on the stone floor. Metal pots, found in wealthier kitchens, are tougher but expensive, often passed down through generations like family heirlooms. These pots sit directly on the hearth's embers or on a trivet, a low iron stand that keeps them steady over the flames. Their surfaces are scarred from years of use, and their handles, often just loops of metal or clay, are scalding hot, forcing you to wrap them in rags to avoid burns. Every pot is a multitasker, used for boiling, stewing, or even soaking laundry when the cooking's done. Hanging nearby or stacked against the wall are the skillets and frying pans, shallow metal or clay dishes for quick cooking. These are rare in peasant kitchens, where boiling reigns supreme, but in manor houses, they're essential for frying onions, herbs, or the occasional luxury like eggs or fish. Skillets are typically iron, with long handles to keep your hands away from the fire. They're heavy, and flipping food requires a strong wrist and a bit of courage, as hot grease can spit like an angry cat. Clay skillets, more common in poorer homes, are lighter but prone to shattering. You'd heat them slowly on the hearth, tossing in a bit of lard or oil, if you could afford it, to sizzle up your ingredients. The skillet's surface is seasoned with years of grease, giving every dish a slightly smoky, earthy flavor, whether you wanted it or not. Cleaning? A quick scrape with a wooden spoon, maybe a rinse with gritty water, and it's back to work. Now, let's talk about the wooden spoons and ladles, the medieval cook's most trusted allies. These are carved from oak, ash, or beech, their handles worn smooth by years of stirring pottage or scooping broth. Spoons come in all sizes, small ones for mixing herbs, large ones for serving stew. The wood is often splintered, stained with the ghosts of countless meals. Ladles, with their deep, bowl-like scoops, are used to portion out pottage or transfer hot liquids from the cauldron to bowls. Some have crude carvings on the handles, maybe a cross or a simple pattern, a touch of personality in an otherwise utilitarian world. In wealthier homes, you might find a ladle made of horn or even silver, a status symbol for the Lord's table. But for most, wood is king. These tools are never washed with soap. There isn't any. You'd rinse them in a bucket or wipe them on your apron, hoping no bits of last week's stew linger too long. On a rough wooden shelf or hanging from a beam, you'll find the knives, the all-purpose tools of the medieval kitchen. These aren't your sleek chef's knives with ergonomic handles. They're crude, iron blades, hand-forged, with wooden or bone handles wrapped in leather or twine for grip. The blades are often nicked, dulled from years of chopping vegetables, hacking meat, or even doubling as a tool for scraping hides or cutting rope. Every household has at least one knife, used for everything from peeling turnips to gutting fish. In poorer homes, it's a single precious blade shared by the whole family, guarded like a treasure. Sharpening is done on a whetstone, a flat slab of gritty rock kept near the hearth. You'd rub the blade against it, spitting on the stone for lubrication, until it's sharp enough to slice through tough roots or gristly meat. Knives are dangerous, not just for cutting, but because a rusty blade or a dirty cut could mean infection, a death sentence in a world without antibiotics. Beside the knives, you might spot a cleaver, a heavy, broad-bladed tool for breaking down larger cuts of meat or chopping through bones. Cleavers are rare in peasant kitchens. Meat is too scarce to need one, but in manor houses, they're essential for preparing feasts. The cleaver's weight does most of the work, its iron blade slamming through cartilage with a satisfying thud. It's not precise, but it doesn't need to be. Like the knife, it's sharpened on the whetstone, and its handle is often wrapped in rags to cushion the impact on your hand. Using a cleaver feels like wielding a weapon, and in a pinch it could be. Medieval kitchens blur the line between cooking and survival, and every tool reflects that reality. Tucked in a corner or hanging from a hook are the baskets and sacks, the medieval answer to storage. Baskets are woven from willow, rush, or straw. They're tight weaves holding everything from apples to dried hurricane. They're lightweight but sturdy, often repaired with bits of twine when they start to fray. Sacks, made of coarse linen or hemp, store grains, flour, or dried herbs. They're tied with string and hung high to keep out rats, though good luck with that. Rodents are as much a part of the kitchen as you are. In wealthier homes, you might find wooden chests lined with cloth to store precious spices or dried fruit, locked to prevent theft by servants or neighbors. Everything in the kitchen is vulnerable to pests, damp, or mold, so storage is a constant battle. You check your baskets daily, shaking out weevils or picking out spoiled bits, knowing that every lost grain is a step closer to hunger. Finally, let's look at the mortar and pestle, the medieval spice grinder and herb masher. The mortar is a heavy bowl, usually stone or wood, sometimes clay, with a rough interior for grinding. The pestle is a club-like tool, often made of the same material used to crush herbs, grains, or even garlic into paste. Grinding is slow, arm-aching work, but it's how you turn dried thyme or coriander seeds into flavor. In peasant kitchens, the mortar might be a simple hollowed-out stone, while wealthier homes boast polished granite or marble sets. Spices are rare and costly. Pepper or cinnamon is worth more than a month's wages, so the mortar is used sparingly, often for medicinal herbs or to stretch what little seasoning you have. The rhythmic thump of the pestle against the mortar is a sound as old as the kitchen itself, a quiet reminder of the labor behind every bite. Welcome back, weary dreamers, to the warm, smoky embrace of our medieval kitchen. The fire's still crackling, casting shadows on the sooty walls, and the scent of stew and wood smoke lingers in the air. We've covered the hearth's glow, the iron tools, and the pots that hum with daily survival. Now, let's turn to the vessels and containers that hold the lifeblood of this kitchen. The bowls, barrels, and jars that store and serve the meager bounty of a medieval meal. Picture yourself standing in this cluttered, dimly lit space, where every item is a hard-won ally in the fight against hunger. Let's dive deeper into the medieval kitchen, item by item, as the gentle rhythm of history carries you towards sleep. First, let's pick up a wooden bowl, the humble heart of the medieval table. These bowls are carved from oak, ash, or sometimes softer woods like poplar. Their surfaces rough and uneven from hand tools. They're shallow and wide, designed to hold a portion of pottage, porridge, or, on rare occasions, a bit of meat or cheese. The wood is often cracked or stained, bearing the scars of countless meals. In peasant homes, everyone shares a few bowls, passed around the family as you scoop stew with your fingers or a spoon. Wealthier households might have more, sometimes decorated with simple carvings or even inlaid with bone for a touch of status. These bowls aren't just for eating. They're used for mixing dough, soaking beans, or even holding ashes when you're scrubbing pots. They're never truly clean, just wiped with a rag or rinsed in cold water, carrying the faint taste of yesterday's meal into today's. Next to the bowls, you'll find trenchers, the medieval equivalent of a plate, but with a twist. A trencher is a thick, flat piece of stale bread, usually made from coarse rye or barley, used as an edible serving surface. You'd pile your food, pottage, a scrap of meat, or some boiled greens onto the bread, letting it soak up the juices. After the meal, you might eat the trencher itself, softened by the food's moisture, or toss it to the dogs or pigs if you're feeling wasteful. In wealthier homes, trenchers might be wooden instead, rectangular slabs polished smooth and reused for years. These wooden trenchers are a status symbol, often shared between two diners at a lord's table, a reminder that even eating is a communal act. They're wiped down with a cloth, but never truly sanitary. Every scratch in the wood holds a bit of grease or broth, a silent history of feasts and famines. Hanging from a rafter or tucked in a corner are jars and crocks, the medieval kitchen's storage heroes. These are made of clay, fired to a dull red or gray, with thick walls to keep out moisture. They're sealed with wooden lids, wax, or sometimes just a cloth tied with twine, holding everything from dried peas to honey to rendered fat. Jars are small enough to carry but heavy, their surfaces often chipped or cracked from rough handling. In peasant homes, you might have just one or two, carefully guarded to store your precious winter supplies. In manor kitchens, rows of crocks line the shelves, filled with preserved foods like salted fish or pickled cabbage. The clay absorbs the smells of its contents, so a jar that once held garlic will flavor everything else you store in it. You check them daily for mold or weevils, knowing that a spoiled jar could mean starvation come winter. Now, let's look at the barrels, the heavyweights of medieval storage. These are made of oak staves bound with iron or wooden hoops, their construction a marvel of carpentry. Barrels hold the big stuff, grain, ale, or salted meat, and they're built to last, often outliving their owners. In a peasant kitchen, a single small barrel might store your entire year's supply of barley, kept in a corner away from damp. In wealthier homes, barrels are stacked in cellars, holding enough provisions to feed a household through a siege. They're heavy, hard to move, and prone to leaking if the wood swells or shrinks. You tap a barrel of ale with a wooden spigot, pouring it into jugs or straight into your mouth if you're desperate. Barrels are also a favorite hiding spot for mice, so you're always banging on them to scare the critters out before scooping your grain. Tucked near the hearth is the water bucket, a wooden or leather container that's both a lifeline and a chore. Made of oak slats or boiled leather, it's sealed with pitch to make it watertight, but it still leaks if you're not careful. You'd haul it to the well or stream, a back-breaking task that could take hours, especially in winter when the water's frozen over. The bucket's handle is a rough rope or a wooden grip, chafing your hands with every trip. In the kitchen, it's used for everything: drinking, cooking, washing, or soaking laundry. The water inside is rarely clean, often cloudy with silt or worse, carrying the faint tang of whatever's upstream. You'd strain it through a cloth if you're lucky, but most just drink it and hope for the best. The bucket's a reminder of how precious water is in a world where every drop is earned. On a shelf or hanging from a peg, you'll find cloth sacks and nets, used for carrying and storing smaller items. These are woven from hemp, flax, or even nettle fibers, their coarse texture scratching your hands as you handle them. Sacks hold onions, apples, or dried herbs, tied tightly to keep out pests. Nets, with their loose, open weave, are used for carrying vegetables from the garden or hanging garlic and onions to dry near the hearth. They're patched and repatched, every tear a testament to their constant use. In wealthier kitchens, you might find finer linen sacks for storing spices or dried fruit, but even these are practical, not pretty. Every sack and net is a battleground against rats and damp, and you're always checking for holes or mold, knowing that a single spoiled onion could ruin your whole stash. Finally, let's pick up the horn cup or wooden mug, the medieval answer to a drinking glass. Horn cups are made from cow or goat horns, boiled and shaped into smooth, translucent vessels. They're lightweight but sturdy, with a faint animal smell that never quite goes away. Wooden mugs, carved from a single piece of wood, are heavier, their surfaces often splintered or stained from years of ale or weak wine. In peasant homes, the whole family might share one mug, passed around during meals. In manor kitchens, you might find a set, each marked with a carved initial to avoid fights. These cups are never washed with soap, just a quick rinse in the water bucket, leaving behind a patina of every drink they've ever held. Sipping from one feels like tasting history itself, a mix of ale, grit, and the faint echo of a cow. Hello again, drowsy wanderers, and welcome back to the flickering warmth of our medieval kitchen. The hearth glows softly, its embers casting a gentle light across the cluttered, smoky room. The air is thick with the scent of simmering pottage and damp earth, and every creak of the wooden beams overhead feels like a whisper from the past. We've explored the tools, pots, and vessels that keep this kitchen alive, but now let's turn to the ingredients and small but vital items that transform the raw stuff of the earth into sustenance. These are the grains, herbs, and sieves that define medieval cooking, each one a testament to the ingenuity and struggle of feeding a family in 1350. Settle deeper into your blankets, let the world blur, and let's continue our journey through every single item in this ancient kitchen. First, let's open a sack of grain, the backbone of the medieval diet. Inside, you'll find barley, rye, or oats, rarely wheat, which is a luxury for the wealthy. The grains are coarse, speckled with chaff and the occasional pebble, a reminder of the crude milling done by hand or at the Lord's mill. You'd store them in a hemp sack or small barrel, hung high to keep out rats, but you're still picking out weevils every time you scoop a handful. Grinding grain is women's work in most households, done with a corn stone, a pair of heavy, flat stones you turn by hand. The bottom stone is fixed, the top one rotates, and you pour grain into a hole in the center, grinding it into gritty flour. It's backbreaking, taking hours to produce enough for a single loaf, and the flour is coarse, full of bran and bits of stone that wear down your teeth over time. This flour is the start of everything: bread, pottage, or porridge, and every grain is precious, a bulwark against the hunger that's never far away. Next, let's reach for a bundle of dried herbs, hanging from a rafter near the hearth to keep them dry. These are the medieval cook's flavor palette: thyme, sage, parsley, or dill, gathered from the garden or wild fields. They're tied with twine, their leaves brittle and fragrant, a faint echo of summer in the dim winter kitchen. Herbs are more than seasoning, they're medicine, used to soothe coughs or settle stomachs. You'd crumble them into pottage or rub them onto meat if you're lucky enough to have any. In wealthier homes, you might find a spice box, a small wooden or clay container holding precious imports like pepper, saffron, or cloves. These are locked away, worth more than gold, used only for feasts or to impress a visiting noble. For peasants, onions and garlic, hung in nets or braided into ropes, are the real flavor heroes, adding depth to the endless monotony of grain-based meals. Every pinch of herb or spice is a calculated choice, stretching what little you have to make the inedible bearable. On a shelf, you'll find a sieve or strainer, a simple but essential tool for refining ingredients. Most are made of woven horsehair or fine linen stretched over a wooden frame. They're mesh coarse but effective for sifting flour or straining broth. You'd shake the sieve over a bowl, catching bits of chaff or grit from your ground grain, or use it to filter herbs and bones from a watery stew. In poorer homes, a piece of old cloth might double as a strainer, held over a pot while you pour hot liquid through it, burning your fingers in the process. Wealthier kitchens might have a metal sieve, a rare and costly item with a fine mesh hammered from thin bronze or iron. Sieves are fussy to clean, the mesh clogging with damp flour or grease, but they're a small victory against the grit and grime that define medieval food. Every shake of the sieve is a step toward something slightly less chewy, slightly more palatable. Tucked near the hearth is a butter churn, a wooden or clay vessel that's both a tool and a promise of luxury. The churn is a tall, narrow cylinder with a wooden plunger, or dash, that you work up and down to turn cream into butter. Cream is rare. Most peasants can't spare the milk, which goes to cheese or drinking. But in wealthier homes, butter is a prized treat, spread on bread or melted into sauces. Churning is exhausting, taking up to an hour of relentless pounding, and the rhythm, thump, 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 becomes a kitchen lullaby. The churn's wood is smooth from use, stained with faint traces of dairy, and the plunger often doubles as a stirring stick when not in use. Cleaning it is a chore, requiring hot water and a good scrub with ashes, but the reward is a golden pat of butter, a small rebellion against the grayness of pottage life. Hanging from a hook or stored in a crock is lard or tallow, the medieval cook's go-to fats. Lard, rendered from pig fat, is kept in a clay jar, its surface slick and waxy, used for frying or enriching dough. Tallow, made from beef or mutton fat, is harder, with a stronger smell, often used for cooking or making candles. Both are precious, eked out in tiny amounts to stretch meager meals. You'd scoop them with a wooden spoon, melting a bit in the skillet to fry onions or grease the baking stone for flatbreads. In lean times, you might spread lard on bread as a meal in itself, a calorie-dense lifeline when crops fail. The jars are sealed tightly to keep out flies, but the fats still turn rancid if not used quickly, filling the kitchen with a sour tang that clings to everything. Near the water bucket, you'll find a scouring pad. Not the modern sponge, but a bundle of straw, rushes, or even dried nettles tied together. This is your dishwashing tool, used to scrub pots, bowls, and spoons with a mix of ash, sand, or plain water. Scouring is brutal on your hands, leaving them raw and chapped, and it never gets things fully clean, just clean enough to use again. In wealthier kitchens, you might have a linen rag for wiping surfaces, but these are rare and often repurposed from old clothing. The scouring pad is a reminder of the endless labor behind every meal, from hauling water to scrubbing soot off the cauldron. You'd rinse it in the bucket, wring it out, and hang it near the fire to dry, knowing it'll be back in action by morning. Finally, let's glance at the salt box, a small wooden or clay container that holds one of the medieval world's most valuable commodities. Salt is kept in a lidded box or jar, often locked in wealthier homes to prevent theft. It's used sparingly to season food or preserve meat and fish, its coarse grains mined from distant salt pans or evaporated from seawater. You'd pinch it out with your fingers, savoring the sharp bite it adds to pottage or the way it stretches a fish's shelf life through winter. Salt is currency, sometimes worth more than the food it seasons, and every grain is measured carefully. The box itself is plain, maybe carved with a simple cross, but it's treated with reverence, a tiny fortress against the blandness and decay that threaten every meal. Welcome back, sleepy souls, to the heart of our medieval kitchen, where the hearth's embers glow like fading stars and the air hums with the earthy scent of grain and smoke. The room feels alive, its rough walls and worn tools whispering stories of survival and sustenance. We've wandered through the pots, knives, and sacks that keep the space running, but now let's focus on the final pieces, the perishables, the jugs, and the small, often overlooked items that complete the medieval cook's world. Picture yourself in this dim, cluttered kitchen in 1350, the fire's warmth on your face, as we explore every last item that brings this space to life. Let the soft rhythm of these ancient tools and foods lull you closer to sleep. First, let's peek into a cheesecloth, a coarse linen square draped over a wooden frame or hanging near the hearth. This is where milk becomes cheese, a rare treat in peasant homes but a staple in wealthier ones. You'd pour curdled milk, soured with rennet from a calf's stomach, into the cloth, letting the whey drip into a bowl below. The cloth is stained, its fibers stiff with dried milk, but it's reusable, rinsed in cold water and dried by the fire. The cheese itself, if you're lucky enough to have it, is stored in a cool corner, wrapped in more cloth or packed in a clay crock. It's soft and tangy, nothing like modern cheddar, and often riddled with mold you'd scrape off or eat anyway. Cheese is a lifeline, a dense source of calories when crops fail, and every wheel or wedge is a small miracle of preservation in a world without refrigeration. Next, let's pick up a clay jug, the medieval kitchen's answer to a pitcher. These are tall, narrow vessels with a single handle and a pinched spout, fired to a dull red or brown. They hold ale, weak wine, or sometimes just water, though water is rarely trusted on its own. The clay is porous, keeping liquids cool through evaporation, but it also absorbs flavors, so a jug that's held ale for years will taint anything else you pour in. Jugs are fragile, their rims often chipped from clumsy hands or rough tables. In peasant homes, you might have just one, shared among the family, while manor kitchens boast several, some glazed with green or yellow lead, pretty but mildly toxic. You'd pour carefully, tilting the jug to avoid sediment, and wipe the spout with your sleeve when you're done. It's never truly clean, just like everything else in this kitchen. Tucked in a corner or hanging from a peg is a bellows, a leather and wooden tool for coaxing life into a stubborn fire. The bellows is two wooden paddles joined by a leather bag, with a metal nozzle at one end. You'd pump it by hand, forcing air into the hearth's embers to spark a flame or boost a dying fire. It's heavy, the leather cracked from heat and use, and the effort leaves your arms aching. In poorer homes, you might just blow on the fire with your own breath or fan it with a straw mat, but a bellows is a step up, a sign you've got enough resources to make fire tending slightly less miserable. The wheeze of the bellows is a familiar sound, a rhythmic huff that punctuates the kitchen's daily grind, as vital as the crackle of the flames it feeds. On a shelf or in a basket, you'll find dried fish or salted meat, the medieval kitchen's emergency rations. Fish, usually herring or cod, is dried on racks in the sun or smoked over the hearth. Its flesh tough and leathery, stored in nets or crocks. Salted meat, pork or beef if you're lucky, is packed in barrels with coarse salt. Its surface gray and shriveled but still edible after months. These are peasant treasures, eaten sparingly in winter when fresh food is a memory. You'd soak them in water to soften the fish or leach out the salt, then simmer them in pottage to stretch their flavor. The smell is pungent, a mix of brine and decay, and you're always checking for maggots or mold. Every bite is a reminder of scarcity, a hard-won protein in a diet of grain and roots. Near the hearth, you might spot a rushlight holder, a small iron or wooden stand for lighting the kitchen after dark. Rushlights are made from reeds dipped in tallow or lard, then clamped in the holder's jaws to burn slowly, casting a weak, flickering glow. They're cheaper than candles, which are a luxury for the rich, but they smoke and sputter, dripping fat if you're not careful. The holder is simple, often just a split stick or a forged iron clip, but it's essential in a world where night falls hard and the hearth's light isn't enough. You'd trim the rushlight with your fingers, pinching off the charred end, and pray it lasts long enough to finish your chores. The holder's base is crusted with hardened drippings, a testament to countless evenings spent squinting in the gloom. Hanging from a rafter is a rope of onions or garlic, braided together to dry in the kitchen's warmth. These are the workhorses of medieval flavor, grown in every garden and cheap enough for even the poorest households. The papery skins rustle as you brush past, and their sharp, earthy scent cuts through the kitchen's smoky haze. You'd pull one off, chop it with your knife, and toss it into the cauldron to give the pottage some life. Onions and garlic are also medicine, boiled into broths for colds or rubbed on wounds as a desperate antiseptic. They're stored carefully, checked for rot, because a spoiled bulb could ruin the whole braid. In a world of bland grains, these humble alliums are a quiet gift, turning survival into something almost tasty. Finally, let's touch the kneading trough, a shallow wooden basin for making bread. It's carved from a single piece of oak or elm, its interior smooth from years of dough and sweat. You'd mix your coarse flour with water, maybe a bit of ale for yeast, and knead it in the trough, your hands sinking into the sticky mass. The wood is scarred, stained with flour and grease, and it's never washed, just scraped clean with a knife. In peasant homes, the trough is small, barely enough for a family's daily loaf, while manor kitchens have larger ones for feeding dozens. Kneading is intimate, a full-body effort that leaves you aching but connected to the food you'll eat. The trough is the final step, where raw ingredients become sustenance, a quiet alchemy born of muscle and time. Hey there, sleepy listeners. Welcome back to our history podcast, crafted to cradle you into a peaceful slumber with tales from the past. Tonight, we're returning to the medieval kitchen, not to catalog its tools but to live a day in its rhythm, a day of fire, labor, and the quiet alchemy of turning scraps into sustenance. It's 1350, and the kitchen is the pulsing heart of the household, where every task, from dawn to dusk, is a dance with necessity. Imagine you're there, the air thick with wood smoke, the floor cool under your feet, and the weight of survival on your shoulders. Let's follow the daily routines of this kitchen, hour by hour, and feel the pulse of medieval life. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the crackle of the hearth carry you away. The day begins before dawn, in the gray half-light when the world is still cloaked in mist. You wake on a straw pallet near the hearth, the embers barely glowing from last night's fire. Your first task is to revive the fire, the kitchen's lifeblood. You kneel by the hearth, your breath visible in the chilly air, and poke the ashes with the iron poker, searching for a spark. You add kindling, twigs and dry straw gathered yesterday, and pump the bellows, its leather creaking as air wheezes into the embers. A flame catches, small at first, then stronger, and you feed it logs, their bark rough under your fingers. The room warms, shadows dancing on the wattle and daub walls, and the kitchen stirs to life. In a peasant hut, this is your job alone. In a manner, you might rouse a sleepy scullion to help, their grumbles mixing with the fire's crackle. The hearth is your master, and keeping it alive is a sacred duty, for without it, there's no food, no heat, no survival. As the fire steadies, you turn to fetching water, a task as relentless as the seasons. You grab the wooden bucket, its rope handle fraying, and trudge to the well or stream, perhaps a quarter-mile away. The path is muddy, your shoes, little more than leather wraps, squelching with every step. The bucket is heavy, sloshing with cloudy water that smells faintly of earth and leaves. Back in the kitchen, you pour it into the cauldron, careful not to spill, and set some aside in a clay jug for drinking. The water's never clean, but you strain it through a linen cloth if you're lucky, picking out bits of grit. This is your morning ritual, repeated daily, your arms aching from the weight but knowing every drop is precious. In a manner, you might send a servant to the well, but even then you oversee the hall, ensuring enough for cooking, washing, and the Lord's table. With water secured, it's time to prepare the pottage, the meal that defines medieval life. You scoop barley or oats from a hemp sack, shaking out weevils as you go, and pour them into the cauldron, already simmering over the fire. You add a handful of chopped turnips, their roots gnarled and earthy, and a braid of onions, their papery skins crumbling as you slice them with the kitchen's lone knife. If you're in a peasant home, this is your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, maybe flavored with a pinch of sage from a dried bundle. In a manner, you might toss in a scrap of salted pork, its fat glistening, to feed the Lord's retinue. You stir with a wooden spoon, its handle worn smooth, watching the pottage thicken as the fire spits embers. The cauldron's heat is fickle, so you adjust the chain to raise or lower it, a delicate balance learned through years of burns and undercooked meals. This stew will simmer all day, ingredients added as they're scavenged, a living pot that never empties. Mid-morning brings the grinding of grain, a task that fills the kitchen with a gritty rhythm. You sit by the corn stone, its rough surface cool under your hands, and pour rye or barley into the central hole. Turning the top stone is grueling, your shoulders burning as you grind, the flour collecting in a wooden bowl below. The flour is coarse, flecked with bran and bits of stone, but it's the foundation of bread, the pottage's companion. In a peasant kitchen, this is women's work, done while children cling to your skirts or chickens peck at the floor. In a manner, you might oversee servants at a larger quern, their chatter drowned by the stone's scrape. It takes an hour to grind enough for a small loaf, and you pause to wipe sweat from your brow, the kitchen now warm and smoky, the hearth's heat seeping into your bones. This flour is life, and every turn of the stone is a prayer against famine. As noon approaches, you knead the dough in the kneading trough, its wooden surface scarred from years of use. You mix the flour with water and a splash of ale for yeast, your hands sinking into the sticky mass. Kneading is intimate, a full-body rhythm as you push and fold, the dough resisting then yielding. In a peasant home, you shape it into a rough round and set it on the baking stone, heated in the hearth's embers, praying it cooks through without burning. In a manner, you might slide it into the beehive oven, its clay walls still hot from a morning fire, the scent of baking bread a rare luxury. While the bread bakes, you check the pottage, skimming foam with a ladle and adding a pinch of salt from the locked salt box, its sharp grains a treasure you measure like gold. The kitchen is alive now, steam rising, the fire roaring, and you move between tasks with practiced ease, a conductor of this smoky symphony. Afternoon is for preserving and preparing, stretching today's bounty for tomorrow's hunger. You might wrap soft cheese in a linen cloth, pressing it under a stone to firm up, or soak dried fish in a bucket to soften its leathery flesh. If you're lucky, you slaughter a chicken, its feathers plucked by hand, its innards saved for broth, and skewer it on the spit for the Lord's Supper, turning it slowly over the fire, the fat dripping with a sizzle. In a peasant kitchen, you're more likely mending a net of onions, checking for rot, or crushing herbs in the mortar and pestle, the thump of the pestle a steady beat. You sweep the floor with a bundle of rushes, stirring up dust and ash, and scrub the cauldron with a scouring pad, your hands raw from ash and grit. Every task is a race against spoilage, pests, and the ever-looming winter, when stores will dwindle and the hearth's warmth will be all that stands between you and the cold. As evening falls, the kitchen grows dim, lit only by the hearth and a flickering rushlight clamped in its iron holder. You serve the meal, ladling pottage into wooden bowls and breaking the bread, its crust hard but warm. In a peasant home, the family gathers around the hearth, sharing a single bowl, scooping with spoons or fingers, the silence broken only by the fire's crackle. In a manner, you carry trenchers to the great hall, piling them with pottage, roasted meat, or a rare sauce of herbs and wine, your hands trembling under the weight of the Lord's expectations. After the meal, you clean, scraping bowls with a knife, rinsing spoons in the water bucket, and banking the fire with ashes to keep it smoldering through the night. The kitchen quiets, the day's labor settling into your bones, and you curl up near the hearth, the faint glow of embers your only companion as sleep takes you. Welcome back, drowsy travelers, to another soothing journey through the medieval world, crafted to ease you into a gentle slumber. Since we've explored every item in the 1350 medieval kitchen and walked through its daily routines, let's shift our focus to the food itself. The ingredients, preparations, and humble meals that filled the bellies of peasants and lords alike. Tonight, we'll immerse ourselves in the flavors, textures, and struggles of medieval cooking, painting a vivid picture of what it meant to eat in a time when every bite was hard-won. Picture yourself in that familiar smoky kitchen, the hearth crackling, the air thick with the scent of simmering grains and herbs. Let's explore the food of this 14th century world, dish by dish, as the rhythm of the past lulls you towards sleep. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let's begin. The cornerstone of every medieval meal is pottage, the ever-present stew that simmers in the cauldron day and night. You start with a base of grains, barley, oats, or rye, poured from a hemp sack into the blackened iron pot. The grains are coarse, speckled with chaff, and you pick out the worst of the weevils before they hit the water. You add whatever vegetables you have. Turnips, they're flesh-dense and slightly bitter. Cabbage, its leaves tough from late harvest, or leeks, their green tips wilted but still sharp. Onions and garlic, braided and hung from the rafters, go in next, their earthy pungence cutting through the blandness. If you're a peasant, this might be all you've got, flavored with a pinch of thyme or parsley from a dried bundle. In a manor kitchen, you might add a scrap of salted pork or a chicken bone, its marrow leaching richness into the broth. You stir with a wooden spoon, the cauldron bubbling over the hearth, and let it cook for hours, sometimes days, adding water or scraps as needed. Pottage isn't a recipe. It's a way of life, a thick, warming sludge that fills the stomach and staves off hunger, served in wooden bowls and scooped with fingers or a shared spoon. Bread is pottage's faithful companion, the second pillar of the medieval diet. You begin with the flour you ground yesterday on the cornstone, a gritty mix of rye or barley, rarely wheat unless you're wealthy. In the kneading trough, you mix it with water and a splash of ale, its faint yeastiness coaxing the dough to rise. Kneading is a labor of love, your hands sinking into the sticky mass, the wood smooth under your palms. In a peasant home, you shape the dough into a flat round and lay it on the baking stone, heated in the hearth's embers. You watch it closely, turning it with tongs to avoid a charred crust, the kitchen filling with the warm, nutty scent of baking. In a manner, you slide it into the beehive oven, its clay walls radiating heat, producing a loaf slightly less dense, maybe even brushed with lard for a glossy finish. The bread is heavy, chewy, and flecked with bran, wearing down your teeth over time. You tear it into chunks, using it to sop up pottage or as a trencher for rarer treats like cheese or meat. Every bite is a reminder of the hours spent grinding and baking, a small victory over the field's uncertainty. For protein, most peasants rely on pulses, dried peas, beans, or lentils, stored in clay crocks or linen sacks. You soak them overnight in a bucket of water, their hard shells softening, then toss them into the pottage to simmer. They're bland but filling, adding bulk to the meal and a faint earthiness that pairs with onions. In lean times, pulses are a meal on their own, boiled with a pinch of salt from the precious salt box. In wealthier homes, you might prepare cheese, a rare treat for peasants but more common here. You pour curdled milk into a cheesecloth, letting the whey drip into a bowl, then press the curds under a stone. The result is a soft, tangy wheel, stored in a cool corner and cut into wedges for the Lord's table, perhaps paired with a slice of apple or a smear of honey from a clay jar. Cheese is a treasure, its dense calories a hedge against winter, but you're always scraping off mold or cutting away spoiled bits, a constant battle against decay. Meat is a rarity for peasants, reserved for feast days or the occasional windfall. A pig slaughtered in autumn or a rabbit snared in the woods. If you're lucky, you butcher it with the kitchen's knife and cleaver, saving every scrap. The flesh for roasting, the bones for broth, the fat for lard. You skewer the meat on the spit, turning it slowly over the hearth, the fat sizzling as it drips into the fire, filling the kitchen with a mouth-watering aroma that makes the endless pottage days fade. In a manor kitchen, meat is more common, mutton, pork, or even venison from the Lord's hunt. You might prepare a frumenty, a rich dish of cracked wheat boiled in milk, mixed with egg yolks and a pinch of saffron from the locked spice box, served alongside roasted goose for a feast. The spices are a flex of wealth, their cost staggering, but they transform the dish into something almost magical, a fleeting escape from the monotony of grains. Fish is another protein, especially during Lent or for coastal households. You pull dried herring or salted cod from a net, their flesh tough and pungent, and soak them in water to soften. You simmer them in pottage or fry them in a skillet with a dab of lard, their briny flavor a sharp contrast to the kitchen's usual fare. In wealthier homes, you might prepare fresh fish, eel or pike, poached in a clay pot with parsley and ale, a dish fit for a bishop's visit. Fish is a chore to clean, the knife slipping on slimy scales, and the smell lingers in the kitchen for days, but it's a vital source of sustenance when meat is forbidden or scarce. You check every piece for worms, a grim reality of medieval preservation, and pray the salt has done its job. For sweetness, honey is the medieval kitchen's gold, stored in a clay crock and guarded like a relic. You scoop it with a wooden spoon, its amber thickness dripping slowly, and mix it into porridge or spread it on bread for a rare treat. In peasant homes, honey is a gift from a neighbor's hive, bartered for eggs or labor. In manors, you might use it to glaze a roast or sweeten a custard, a luxurious pudding of eggs, milk, and spices baked in the oven. Fruit, apples, pears, or berries, is another sweet note, stored in baskets or dried in the sun. You chop them into pottage or eat them raw, their tartness a burst of summer in the kitchen's gloom. Fruit spoils quickly, so you're always checking for rot, slicing away soft spots with a knife, knowing every lost bite is a step closer to hunger. Drinks are simple but essential. Ale is the lifeblood, brewed from barley and stored in oak barrels, its flavor weak but safer than water. You pour it into horn cups or wooden mugs, the foam clinging to the sides, and drink it with every meal, even children sipping a diluted version. In wealthier homes, you might serve wine, watered down and poured from a glazed jug, its sour tang a mark of status. Water, when used, comes from the bucket, cloudy and sipped cautiously, often boiled with herbs to mask its taste. Every drink is a ritual, a moment of pause in the kitchen's relentless pace, the mug's weight grounding you as you sip. The medieval kitchen is more than a place to cook. It's the soul of the home, a gathering point where lives intertwine. As dawn breaks, the kitchen stirs with the cook's quiet authority, often a woman in a peasant household or a seasoned servant in a manor. You, the cook, are the keeper of the hearth, your hands scarred from years of tending fires and kneading dough. In a peasant hut, you're the matriarch, stirring pottage while children tug at your skirts, their laughter mingling with the crackle of logs. You teach them to grind grain on the corn stone, their small hands learning the rhythm, a lesson in survival passed down through generations. In a manor, you're the head cook, overseeing a team of scullions, young boys or girls who chop onions, haul water, and dodge your sharp tongue. Your voice carries over the clatter, directing the chaos, but there's warmth in your scolding, a bond forged in the shared labor of feeding dozens. The kitchen is your domain, and every spoon, every flame, bends to your will. As morning unfolds, the kitchen becomes a hub of exchange, where neighbors and kin drift in and out. In a village, your peasant kitchen is open to all. A neighbor might stop by with a handful of herbs, bartering for a scoop of your pottage. You sit by the hearth, sharing gossip about the miller's cheating scales or the priest's latest sermon, the steam from the cauldron curling around your words. These visits are brief but vital, stitching the community together. You might lend a clay jug or borrow a knife, each exchange a thread in the web of mutual reliance. In a manor, the kitchen draws a different crowd, servants gossiping about the Lord's temper, or a traveling peddler offering a pinch of pepper for a warm meal. The kitchen door creaks constantly, and you, the cook, are the gatekeeper, weighing every visitor's worth against your dwindling stores. Yet there's generosity here, a bowl of pottage offered to a hungry stranger, because in 1350, no one survives alone. Midday brings the communal meal, the kitchen's heartbeat. In a peasant home, the family gathers around the hearth, sitting on stools or the dirt floor. You ladle pottage into a shared wooden bowl, the steam rising as hands reach in, tearing chunks of gritty bread. The meal is quiet, broken only by the scrape of spoons or a child's chatter, but it's a ritual of togetherness, a moment when the day's labor pauses. You watch your family eat, calculating how much grain remains, your mind already on tomorrow's pottage. In a manor, the kitchen's role shifts. You prepare trenchers for the great hall, piling them with pottage, roasted mutton, or a rare frumenty laced with saffron. You send servants to carry the food, their steps quick under your watchful eye, but you rarely see the feast. Back in the kitchen, you and the scullions share a simpler meal, dipping bread into the cauldron's dregs, a quiet camaraderie born of sweat and hunger. The kitchen feeds the household, but it's also where you find your own fleeting moments of rest, a stolen sip of ale grounding you. Afternoon is when the kitchen's teaching role shines. In a peasant household, you guide your daughters in the art of survival, showing them how to knead dough, judge the fire's heat, or spot rot in a net of onions. Your hands guide theirs, correcting the angle of a knife or the rhythm of the pestle, your voice soft but firm. These lessons are unspoken inheritances, ensuring the hearth will burn long after you're gone. Boys might learn too, turning the spit or hauling wood, but the kitchen is women's territory, a space where their knowledge reigns. In a manor, you train young scullions, often orphans or village children sent to serve. You teach them to scrub pots with ash, to pluck a chicken without wasting feathers, to move quickly without spilling. They're clumsy, their hands unaccustomed to the cleaver or the bellows, but you're patient, mostly, knowing they'll carry your skills into the world. The kitchen is a school, its lessons written in calluses and burns, shaping the next generation one pottage at a time. As evening falls, the kitchen transforms into a storytelling haven. In a peasant home, the family lingers by the hearth, the rushlights flicker casting shadows on the walls. You might recount a tale of a saint's miracle or a local legend about a haunted well, your voice blending with the fire's crackle. The children listen, wide-eyed, while your husband mends a net, the kitchen a cocoon against the dark. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're glue, binding the family through shared myths and warnings. In a manner, the kitchen hosts its own tales, told by servants as they clean. You sit with the scullions, scraping bowls, while one recounts a knight's bravery or a bawdy jest about the steward. The laughter is hushed, mindful of the Lord's ears, but it's real, a release from the day's grind. The kitchen is a sanctuary, its warmth and food drawing out truths and dreams that daylight keeps hidden. The kitchen also plays a spiritual role, tying the household to the rhythms of faith. You mark the seasons with food, Lent's fish-heavy pottages, Christmas's rare spiced custard. In a peasant kitchen, you pray over the cauldron, asking for a good harvest or protection from plague. The salt boxes cross a reminder of divine presence. You might share a loaf with a beggar, an act of charity to ward off sin. In a manner, you prepare alms for the poor, ladling pottage into jugs for distribution at the gate, your hands steady despite the Lord's grumbling about costs. The kitchen is where faith meets flesh, where every meal is a small offering to God and community. You teach your children or scullions to respect the food, to waste nothing, because in 1350, hunger is a demon that spares no one, and the kitchen is the front line of that battle. As night deepens, the kitchen quiets, but its role as the heart of belonging endures. You bank the fire, the ashes soft under your poker, and curl up near the hearth. The embers glow a promise of tomorrow's warmth. In a peasant home, your family sleeps around you, their breaths mingling with the kitchen's lingering sense of onion and smoke. In a manner, you share a straw pallet with the scullions, the kitchen's stone floor hard but familiar. The tools, the cauldron, the knife, the kneading trough, stand silent, witnesses to the day's labor and love. The kitchen is more than a room. It's a living thread, weaving family, neighbors, and servants into a tapestry of survival. As you drift to sleep, the hearth's faint crackle is a lullaby, a reminder that here, in this smoky heart, you are never alone. The kitchen's heartbeat syncs with the seasons, each turn of the year reshaping your work as the fields and skies dictate what the cauldron holds. As winter's grip loosens, spring awakens the village, and the kitchen becomes a place of cautious hope. You rise before dawn, the air still sharp, and poke the hearth's embers to life, the bellows wheezing as you coax a flame. Your stores are thin, barrels of grain nearly empty, nets of onions down to their last bulbs, but the garden stirs. You venture out, mud clinging to your shoes, to check for early greens. Nettles, dandelion leaves, or wild sorrel, their bitter tang a lifeline after months of dry pulses. Back in the kitchen, you chop them with the knife, their juices staining your fingers, and toss them into the pottage, stretching the last of the barley. In a peasant home, this is your family's salvation, each sprig a promise of fuller meals. In a manner, you send scullions to gather herbs while you prepare a thin broth for the Lord's table, perhaps flavored with a precious pinch of salt. The village is planting now, and you barter a loaf for seeds, peas, leeks, or cabbage, to sow in your own plot, knowing the kitchen's future depends on the earth's mercy. Spring is also when the kitchen ties the household to the village's communal labor. You join neighbors to plow and sow, leaving the hearth to a daughter or a young scullion. The village works as one, sharing oxen or lending hands, and the kitchen is where you repay those debts. A neighbor who helped turn your soil might stop by, muddy and weary, and you offer a bowl of pottage or a heel of bread, the hearth's warmth sealing the bond. In a manner, you feed the laborers, dozens of tenants who till the Lord's fields, ladling pottage into jugs carried to the fields. The kitchen is a hub, its cauldron simmering to fuel the planting, and you calculate every scoop, knowing your stores must last until harvest. Back home, you check the cheesecloth, hoping last week's milk has firmed into a wheel, or stir a crock of fermenting ale. Its bubbles a small defiance against the uncertainty of spring rains. As summer blooms, the kitchen hums with abundance, but also urgency. The garden bursts with leeks, beans, and early berries, and your outside moor, picking fruit or cutting herbs to dry by the hearth. The cornstone grinds less often. Fresh vegetables mean less need for flour, but the kneading trough sees action as you bake lighter breads, sometimes mixed with chopped chives or wild garlic. In a peasant kitchen, you preserve what you can, slicing apples to dry in the sun or packing beans in salt. Every crock a bulwark against winter. You might barter surplus peas for a neighbor's honey. The clay jars wait, a treasure you guard fiercely. In a manner, the kitchen swells with activity. Scullions churn butter, pickle cabbage, or smoke fish brought by coastal traders. You oversee it all, your voice sharp as you direct the salting of a deer from the Lord's hunt, its flesh layered in a barrel with coarse salt. The village is alive, and the kitchen is its pulse, feeding festivals like midsummer, where you roast a lamb on the spit and share ale under the long daylight, the hearth's glow mirrored by bonfires across the fields. Summer also deepens the kitchen's role as a village crossroads. Traders pass through, their carts rattling, and stop at your door, offering salt, iron, or rare spices for a meal. You weigh their wares against your stores, maybe trading a jug of ale for a handful of peppercorns. Their sharp scent a fleeting luxury. Neighbors gather too, swapping stories of blight or drought, and the kitchen becomes a council chamber, your pottage fueling debates over shared fences or the miller's fees. In a manner, you deal with the steward, who demands accounts of every sack and crock, his quill scratching as you list the barley used for alms or the lard spent on a saint's day feast. The kitchen is the village's anchor, its food and warmth drawing in everyone from beggars to knights. And you, the cook, are its quiet diplomat, balancing generosity with survival. When autumn paints the fields gold, the kitchen becomes a fortress of preparation. The harvest floods the village with grain, and your barrels fill with rye or oats, hauled from the Lord's fields or your own small plot. You grind flour daily now, the cornstones scrape a constant song, and bake loaves to store or share with neighbors who helped reap. The garden yields its last, turnips, cabbages, and apples, and you work late, the rushlight flickering as you braid onions or pack crocks with pickled roots. In a peasant kitchen, you slaughter a pig if you're lucky, the cleaver's thud echoing as you salt the meat, every scrap preserved. In a manner, the kitchen is a whirlwind. Scullions butcher hogs, smoke sausages, or press apples into cider, while you roast venison for a harvest feast, its fat sizzling on the spit. The village celebrates together, and your pottage, enriched with fresh carrots and a rare chicken, feeds the reapers, their songs drifting through the open door. The kitchen is the harvest's heart, turning the field's bounty into survival for the cold ahead. Autumn also ties the kitchen to the village's rituals. You prepare for All Souls' Day, baking soul cakes, small, spiced breads, to give to children or beggars who pray for the dead, their voices mingling with the hearth's crackle. In a manner, you craft a grander offering, perhaps a subtlety shaped like a cross, carried to the chapel before the feast. The kitchen is where the village honors its cycles, its food a bridge between the living, the dead, and the divine. You pray over the cauldron, asking for strength to face winter, and share a loaf with a widow who helped you pickle. The act is sacred as any Massachusetts. The kitchen's warmth draws the community closer, its hearth a reminder that no one survives the harvest alone. As winter seals the village in frost, the kitchen becomes a refuge, its fire the only defense against the dark. Your stores, barrels, crocks, and nets are your lifeline, and you ration carefully, measuring grain with a wooden scoop, checking dried fish for mold. The pottage thins, heavy with pulses and sparse on greens, but you keep it simmering, the cauldron's steam a faint comfort. In a peasant kitchen, you huddle with your family, the hearth's glow your only light, and tell stories to pass the long nights, the kneading trough idle until spring. In a manner, you feed the household through endless snows, roasting a rare mutton leg or simmering a fish pottage for Lent. The scullions chatter a spark of life. The village draws inward, but the kitchen remains its core. Neighbors knock, seeking a warm bowl, and you share what you can, knowing they'll return the favor come planting. The hearth's crackle is a promise, tying the kitchen to the fields that will bloom again. The kitchen's connection to the village is unbreakable, its fire fueling not just meals, but the community's endurance. You teach your children to respect the seasons, showing them how to spot a ripe pear or salt a herring, their small hands learning the kitchen's wisdom. In a manner, you train scullions to barter with traders, their eyes wide as they weigh a sack of lentils against a stranger's salt. Every task, stirring, chopping, preserving, is a thread in the village's tapestry, woven through shared labor and shared hunger. As you bank the fire, the ashes soft under your poker, you feel the weight of the year's cycle, the kitchen's role as both anchor and lifeline.